Every network needs one nerd who knows about FCC licenses, and I am your nerd, Casey. I've studied this because I've been interested in it for years. And here's what I want everybody to know about licenses, okay? Before President Trump returned to the Oval Office, licensing was a boring thing the FCC did every 8 years. Every local station in the country has a license. It's renewed every 8 years. And we have not seen a license renewal be rejected for decades. So essentially, once you have a license, you keep your license. And yes, it can be time consuming to do the paperwork to get it renewed, but the FCC historically has not been in the business of challenging licenses. In fact, I spoke with experts last year who said, even if Trump wanted to take away station licenses, it would be so time consuming, it would be tied up in the courts for so long, it would never even happen during his 4 years in office. So that's the context for Trump's latest threats. However, is it possible that the legal landscape has changed? Is it possible that Congress, Republicans in Congress, want to make it easier to revoke licenses? I think all of those possibilities have to be considered because Trump is being so loud and so serious about these license threats, and because his FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, is showing a willingness to not just talk tough, but to use his public platform to bully these media companies. So that's the reality about licenses. They are hard to revoke. But what Brendan Carr and President Trump are doing, they're using their bully pulpits to pressure media companies into changing content. And it feels to me, Casey, if you picture the American media, picture we're all stuck in an elevator together. And it feels like every week, every month, we're going a level lower and lower and lower. We're in an elevator, and every time Trump sues a news outlet, every time he gains a settlement, every time he threatens the licenses, every time Disney or Paramount capitulate, we're sinking lower and lower. And here's the problem. We don't know how much lower this can go.
Well, Brian, we had one major figure in the media landscape weigh in on where we are, perhaps, to use your analogy, categorizing kind of what floor we're on your elevator. And this is the former late night host, David Letterman, who was speaking at a conference earlier today. Let's watch, and then we'll talk about it.
We all see where this is going, correct? It's managed media, and it's no good. It's silly. It's ridiculous. And you can't go around firing somebody because you're fearful or trying to suck up to an authoritarian criminal administration in the Oval Office. That's just not how this works.
Worth noting, Letterman sitting there with Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine. Brian, what do you make of it?
Well, we know what President Trump wants to do. He wants to silence his critics. He wants to stop dissent. The question now becomes, what do figures like David Letterman do? What do journalists like Jeffrey Goldberg do? What do networks like CNN and ABC and CBS do? ABC is under a lot of pressure right now, a lot of angry Kimmel fans that want to hear from the network. We've heard nothing new from ABC today, but we're already hearing from showrunners, producers in Hollywood who say they don't want to work with Disney anymore because of the action against Kimmel. So I'm really struck by that. I'm also struck by some breaking news in the last few minutes, Casey. Jon Stewart, who normally only hosts The Daily Show once a week on Mondays, he's coming back to the show tonight. He's hosting his Comedy Central program tonight because he wants to weigh in on this matter. So we are seeing some loud, some vocal voices trying to push back against the president's threats. But, you know, frankly, it's one of those situations where with free speech, with your rights to free speech, you either use them or you lose them.
All right, Brian, stand by for us. You're going to be part of our panel here. We're also joined by CNN senior legal analyst Ellie Honig. CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel is here, the former Democratic New York Congressman Max Rose, and senior advisor to the Trump 2024 campaign, Brian Lanza. We are also rolling out something new here on The Arena. On the left side of your screen for parts of our show, you're going to see our Arena text chain. You're going to get some additional analysis from some of our top reporters. You can see that conversation has already started. So if you're one of these people that watches on mute, this is for you. And we're going to continue, of course, to have our usual conversation here. And Jamie Gangel, I do want to start with you, and I want to put up what the Drudge Report currently has on their home page, or did earlier today, and double check to see that it's exactly still there, but it looks like this. They call Kimmel and ABC martyr, network under government control, The View censored, Trump orders remaining late night hosts removed. I just think it's worth noting, you know, Matt Drudge, longtime kind of conservative media figure, not been a fan of Trump for quite some time. But as Brian noted, we are at a very a difficult moment
I would say this. I'd add a word to what David Letterman said, and that's dangerous moment. The number of calls that I got from people for the first time who said this is too far, from both Hollywood people, media people. Look, breaking news. Presidents don't like being made fun of. Ask Bill Clinton, ask George W. Bush, but they don't normally cancel late night shows. This is not in a vacuum. Donald Trump doesn't like Stephen Colbert. His contract doesn't get renewed. He doesn't like Jimmy Kimmel. He's gone. You know, what is next? The FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, said earlier today on CNBC, we're not done yet. This has a serious chilling effect on freedom of speech.
Ellie Honig, I think it's worth noting, I mean, basically, Brendan Carr's claim is that the problem with what Kimmel did is not making a joke about the president, but rather characterizing MAGA and the way that Kimmel talked about the shooter and the MAGA movement together. But we heard Brian talk about just how difficult it would be to actually do some of these things. What is your perspective from the legal side? Because there's what happens in the courts, and then there's what these businesses are doing to work, ahead of it.
Exactly. There is a fair debate to be had, and I'm sure we'll have it here today, about whether Jimmy Kimmel's comments were benign or malicious, or good or bad, or evil or whatever. I'm not a fan, but fine. However, the question really is who gets to decide, and where the First Amendment line gets crossed is when there is government coercion. There have been multiple Supreme Court opinions, other federal court opinions over the last several years saying when the government says, we don't like this speech, and if you don't fix it, we will use governmental power through the FCC, the CDC, the White House, what have you. That is where the First Amendment line is crossed. But here's the practical problem, to Jamie's point, and to somebody on the chain. I'll incorporate the chain. Somebody there said there's a chain reaction here. The problem is, who's going to actually have this fight? Because as long as the ABCs and the Next Stars of the world, or certain law firms or certain universities are not standing up, and they're either settling or they're capitulating, we're not going to have that fight where somebody's going to go to court, and there may be, I believe there would be, a ruling saying this does violate the First Amendment. And so what does that lead us to? Donald Trump's rant just now on Air Force One, where he says, well, here's the hit list going down what's next and next. So we can talk about, and there is a First Amendment problem, but until someone stands up and becomes a plaintiff, we're not going to get a resolution in the courts.
So speaking of a list of what may be next, Scott Jennings, a contributor here at CNN, also hosts a radio show, and the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, was just this afternoon on that radio show, and he spoke a little bit about The View, which is, of course, that morning talk program on ABC, the same network that airs Kimmel. Let's watch a little bit of what Carr had to say about The View with Scott.
I would assume you can make the argument that The View is a bona fide news show, but I'm not so sure about that. And I think it's worthwhile to have the FCC look into whether The View and some of these other programs that you have still qualify as bona fide news programs and therefore exempt from the equal opportunity regime that Congress has put in place.
Now, I think Brian Stelter is still with us. Before I want to bring in our Democrat and Republican to weigh in on this for a second. But Brian, I just want to walk our viewers through what this means, right? Because it's a little bit, if you're not really familiar with it, since you're our FCC nerd, what he's talking about is often shorthanded as the equal time rule, right? He is basically saying that they might look and say that The View is required to give equal time to any candidate because it is not a quote-unquote bona fide news program. What could that mean in terms of them going after The View?
Right, and Carr has used this rule to target other networks and other shows as well. He did this around NBC's SNL during the fall campaign season. A lot of these FCC rules and regulations, they exist and they have not been applied. They haven't been tested. They haven't been tried in many years. Carr is trying to flex his muscles and use his power, which is limited, but use his power in new and unprecedented ways. And this is one of those examples. You know, talking about a random, I love The View actually, but a random daytime talk show, picking on the anti-Trump hosts, trying to find a way to get under the skin of ABC, trying to find a way to pressure the network to soften the content. That's what we see Carr doing in real time out loud. You know, at least to his credit, he's not doing this behind the scenes. We can all see it happening in public view. And that's really part of the point. You know, he doesn't have as much power to actually take actions. You know, he can open an investigation, for example, of ABC. He can kind of legally torture ABC for a while, but there's relatively little he can do action-wise. I think Ellie would agree with me. It's much more about a war of words that Carr is engaging in. And right now, he's winning in some cases. The View did not mention Kimmel today. They stayed away from this altogether.
Been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.